What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazik, aka Unique Mazik, the hardest working man in sports and gaming, and we got another one of those NBA 2K19 historic draft class reviews, right? So I've been doing 5 draft classes at a time. Took a little bit of time off in between the last one. We're talking about 1985 to 1989. There's some ballers in these drafts. And there's also one particular draft that's pretty infamous and it's kind of sad, actually. We're going to go through all 5 of them in a minute. All right, peeps, please go ahead and leave a like on this video if you dig it. And also don't forget, if you haven't done it already, subscribe. If you haven't done it already, click the notifications bell. Starting off with the 1985 draft. And in case you have not heard, NBA 2K19 is going to allow you to import historic draft classes from 60, 65, 69, 70, 71, and then 74 through 2017. That's pretty crazy. All right, this 85 draft was pretty strong. Karl Malone was not the #1 pick, but he is the man that had the most win shares of anybody in that draft with a fat 234.6 win shares. Now that is regular season. Somebody was asking what win shares is. It's an estimate of the number of wins contributed by a player. So like I said, that is regular season. Karl Malone obviously didn't win a championship, but that was actually kind of somewhat of a theme for the top guys in this draft, which a lot of them had great careers. As you can see, Karl Malone was in the game already, so I don't have any reason to think he would not be in the draft in the game this time. He was the 13th pick overall. This man was the #1 pick, Patrick Aloysius Ewing, and yes, you can look it up. That is actually his middle name, Patrick Aloysius Ewing. Yes, there you go. 126.4 win shares. Of course, he was in the game. One of the better renders for the legends that they've had. Could be a little bit better, but it's still overall pretty good. Pat was a great player. One of the greatest players that never won a championship. Just a great low post player, great defender, great rebounder. Just a great player. Ran in the mic a lot though, and then Hakeem Olajuwon. The third highest win shares, Terry Porter. Terry Porter was the 24th pick in the draft. He came from University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Went to a couple NBA finals with the Portland Trail Blazers. They could not beat the Pistons or the Bulls. You see Terry Porter's in the game, if that's what you want to call it. I don't know who that man is. I don't know. He looks like a bald head young Bill Cosby. But it's not Bill. So let's hold all the Cosby jokes because none of them are nice. Detlef Schrempf was the man with the 4th highest amount of win shares. He was the 8th pick overall out of the University of Washington. He played for the Mavericks when he got drafted. He was in a 3-point shootout, went to like the end with Larry Bird like early in his career. That was like, I remember as a kid, it was the first time I ever saw him. This was a pretty decent render. His hair should be a little bit higher. Here he's, I don't know what this is about, but it could be better. 109.5 win shares is a lot. There are some really good players outside of the top 5, but AC Green, the Iron Man from Oregon State, 23rd overall pick, he had 99.5 win shares. But who I won't show in this top 5, there was also in this draft, Chris Mullin, that Hall of Famer, Charles Oakley, Joe Dumars, John Hot Rod Williams. You had Xavier McDaniel, Arvydas Sabonis. He's not your Arvydas, he's Arvydas. Spud Webb, Dominique Wilkins' little brother, Gerald Wilkins. There were some good players in this draft for sure. So just know that. Okay, 1986. This was the draft I was talking about that was pretty sad. This draft is like, man, like you want to talk about just like ill-fated everything going on, right? So none of the guys that were really expected to be top guys turned out to be top guys, except for maybe the #1 pick. But the 46th pick overall was Jeff Hornacek, and he ended up having the most win shares of anybody that came out of this draft. Was clearly not a first rounder, one of the better second round picks in the history of the game. And like I said, 108.9, very good career. He was always in the game. He's going to be in the game again this year, no problem. Shouldn't have an issue with that. Coached the Knicks, that didn't go all that well. It is what it is. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the bad things that happened in this draft in a second. But Dennis Rodman was in this draft, 27th overall pick, 89.8 Win Shares, which is a lot. Came from Southeastern Oklahoma State University. The Worm's been in the game for sure. But let's talk about like the number 1 pick. You're going to see him in a second. He had a solid career, even though injury shortened his career. This is a very this picture here, like Dennis Rodman is not like a model or anything in real life, we know, but this picture here is really bad. I'm talking about they got him looking like he should be in the Planet of the Apes, and I think y'all know what side he was going to be on, because that's just not a good picture. It's really bad. Mark Price is number 3, 71.1. Georgia Tech, played with John Sally. You're going to see another guy from the Cavs in a second, but man, number 1 pick is going to be coming up. But the number 2 pick, I'm talking about just this draft was just torn to pieces. Number 2 pick overall was Len Bias, and if you don't know about Len Bias, he's a guy that was drafted by the Boston Celtics and who died on draft night during a draft celebration. With some sort of reaction from cocaine. It was like supposedly the first time he'd ever used it. Here's Ron Harper. He is one of the higher win shares guys. So Len Bias is in this draft. Chris Washburn's in this draft. Number 3 pick overall. He ended up having a flamed out NBA career, had substance abuse issues, was arrested for robbery. It was just a bad situation. William Bedford was the number 6 pick in the draft. He also had some issues with substance abuse. That fell out. Number 7, Roy Tarpley. He battled substance abuse his entire career and recently passed away. I believe it was a drug-related death. It was tough, man. This was Dwayne Pearl Washington was in this draft. He had a bout with substance. I don't know. I mean, you can kind of trace it back to the influx of crack into the inner city in the 80s, and you can kind of connect it somewhat to this draft, and it lets you kind of see what was going on. It was really grabbing a hold. Brad Daugherty was the number 1 pick, but it's a shocking amount, to be honest, of bad stories from the 86 draft. 1987 draft. Look at this. If you're a Bulls fan, you should love this draft because it was huge for the dynasty. We already talked about Mike back in the last video with 84, but this 87 draft was good to the Bulls. But David Robinson was the top player out of this draft. I don't think you get much argument for that. You might get a couple arguments from some people in Chicago, but I don't think it's crazy to give David Robinson number 1. He had the most win shares, 178.7, was in the game already. I don't see any reason why he won't be in the game coming up. Now, the next gentleman, David Robinson, like I said, was number 1 pick. The next gentleman's not going to be in the game. I'm pretty positive of that. Reggie Miller was the guy with the 2nd most win shares. Like I said, this is regular season. 174.4. He was 11th pick overall out of UCLA. He had a lot more hair when he got drafted. He had like a little pump with the little I don't know what you want to call it, little alpine ski lift thing on the front of it. But there you go. Scottie Pippen, the 5th pick overall, had the 3rd most win shares. If you got an argument from anybody about who was the best player to ever come out of this draft, you would probably get some people to say Scottie Pippen. And I can understand why. 6 championships alongside Mike. The best Robin to a Batman there has ever been in the NBA history. Scottie. Yes. Been in the game. Definitely will be continued. Another one of the really good renders, I think, of the Legends. I think that one is pretty solid. Could have been a little bit better, but still good. Now, I told you, this draft was really good to the Bulls, right? And that's why. Same draft in the 1st round as well. 5 picks after Scottie, the Bulls got Horace Grant. And I say this to everybody, anybody when this subject comes up. The Bulls teams with Horace Grant and Bill Cartwright, to me, were better teams than the Bulls teams with Rodman and Luke Longley. I know those teams set the single season record, but as a complete team, I saw both teams. I saw like every game from both teams. As a complete team, from a defensive standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, Mike was younger. I think they were a better team. That's just what I think. Kevin Johnson, KJ, 92.8 win shares. He was also in this draft. He just recently got added to 2K, so I think he'll still be there. You also have Mark Jackson, hand down, man down. You got Derek McKee, Armand Gilliam, Muggsy Bogues, Kenny Smith, Olden Polynice, Reggie Lewis. Unfortunately, he also passed away. He collapsed on the court, then collapsed in a practice facility after that and passed away. That's another sad story there. Kevin Gamble, Ken Norman, Chris Dudley, Sharunas Marshalonis, Lithuania, stand up. You got Vincent Askew. A lot of players came out that draft, so that was a pretty good draft too. 1988. Danny Manning, baby. Danny Manning was the #1 pick overall in that draft. Danny Manning battled injuries, though, most of his career. And that's why he's not even actually in the top 5 of the guys from win share standpoint. Hersey Hawkins was #1. This was a pretty weak draft, to be honest. Hersey Hawkins was a solid player, but if Hersey Hawkins has the most win shares out of anybody in your draft, then you know your draft wasn't that great. It was good. It was decent, but it wasn't great. This is not a good picture of Hersey Hawkins. This is not a good render of Hersey Hawkins, I should say. He just looks like a random black man who just got asked a question that he don't know the answer to, and it's very important that he answer the question correctly, but he don't know the answer, and that's not good. Anthony Mason, Mace, he is not in 2K, and I think that, he recently passed away, I think in the last 3 or 4 years, and I think sometimes 2K has a hard time negotiating with like estates and families and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of guys who recently passed away who are not in the game, and I think Anthony Mason his situation might be caught up in that. Third is Rod Strickland. Rod Strickland was a really good player. He's a really good player. Never really got a chance to play on a really, really true winner, but he was a really good player. And you hear point guards from that era talk about some of the best players they played against. A lot of them will mention Rod Strickland, but the win shares and the overall success is not there. He played 17 seasons though. I don't really like that render. I don't know. It looked like one of the dudes from Jagged Edge or something. It doesn't really look like him to me. Mitch Richmond to me was the best player in this draft though. Best overall. Now I know the win shares wasn't there, but you got to think he played with a good team when he first got to the league because he played for Golden State Warriors with Run TMC. It was him, Tim Hardaway, and Chris Mullin. But he spent most of his career with bad Sacramento Kings teams. But Mitch Richmond was the truth. That's a horrible render. I have no idea who that is. That's like an African boxer or something. I don't know who that is. It's not him though. This is bad. This is bad. Even when he had hair early, this ain't good. So 2K really needs to work on these legend renders. I know it's not going to happen, especially not this year, but they do need to work on it. But yes, to me, he was the best player in that draft. Dan Marley, Thunder Dan, 78.5 win share. A lot of people don't realize, man, when Dan Marley first got to the league, he was dunking on people. Like, get out of the way. And then later on in his career, just kind of turned himself into a spot-up shooter. Really good render there for him. But he was a good player. You also had Grant Long. Rick Smits was the #2 pick in that draft. He was there. Danny Manning, like I said. Steve Kerr. Charles Smith. Vinny Del Negro. Ronnie Cycli. Chris Morris. Harvey Grant, which is Horace's twin brother, came out a year later. Vernon Maxwell was in that draft too. Rex Chapman too. He's had some problems, but he was in that draft as well. Let's go to 1989, last year of this particular episode. And this draft was a little bit, I don't know. This one wasn't all that great either, to be honest. It had some good players in it, but it was probably better than the last draft, I would say. Vlade Divac ended up with the most win shares, though, 96.4. He played for some really good Sacramento Kings teams, went to the finals with the Lakers, so he was a part of a lot of winners, right? This render that they have of him is decent, but it looks a little weird, but it's not as bad as some of the other ones that we've seen. But Vlade was a solid player. Obviously, like you said, he was, as you can see, he was in the game, so there you go. Clifford Robinson is not in the game. 89.7 win shares. Came out of UConn. He was a number 36 pick overall. He's definitely one of the better second rounders in history too, but he's not in the game. I don't know why. I'm not sure. He's an odd omission to me, and I don't know if anybody cares enough to kind of find out. I don't know what in the world Shawn Kemp is doing here. I don't know. It looked like he failed and is embarrassed about it, and they called him in the middle of it. But Shawn Kemp was a monster, right? A straight up monster. One of the most exciting players you ever want to see play. Just crazy good. This was a pretty decent render. It's cartoonish, but it's pretty decent. But 89.5 for him. Alcoholism kind of hurt his career later on, and I think it cut it a little bit short. But he was a beast. Glen Rice, number 4 pick overall, got drafted by the Miami Heat. When he got drafted, he had a little pump. So he wasn't bald at that time. He went bald later on when he got to Charlotte, and then he played for the Lakers as well too. But University of Michigan, they beat my Illinois Flying Illini in the NCAA title game. Hurt my heart. Ramil Robinson sank them free throws. I just was mad, right? But yeah, he was in the game already. That's not a bad render. You know, it's like a little brown tadpole a little bit, but it was still, it's not a bad one. It's not a bad. Tim Hardaway, number 14th pick overall, the UTEP two-step, that crossover. You want to know who, to me, in my opinion, still has the nastiest crossover ever? Nobody's crossover was like Tim Hardaway. It was so quick, so fast, so low to the ground. It was just, and he was like a little bowling ball. Anyway, this render's decent. It's okay. But yes, 85 win shares, really good. Mookie Blaylock was in this draft. That was he had a little tough situation, legal situation going on. Sean Elliott was in this draft. Nick Anderson, Dana Barrows, B.J. Armstrong, Danny Ferry, Sherman Douglas, Pooh Richardson, all of those guys in the draft. So 89 wasn't too bad. That's all I got for you guys for this one. As always, I talk sports and I talk gaming, and I always appreciate you watching. God bless and peace.
I'll be weak, I'm rather unique.